Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to welcome you today to this conversation with Rafael Domenech, dear friend and artist whose work is redefining the very nature of artistic practice, exhibition making, and the visitor's experience of art. Rafael's approach is deeply rooted in architecture, publishing, sculpture, and design, dismantling hierarchies between these traditional disciplines. Born in Cuba, yes, he is Cuban, and now based in the United States, Rafael's personal migration story deeply informs his work. Movement, adaptation, and a strong sensitivity to human interactions are central themes in his practice. Whether through his modular book paintings, iconic ones that you can see at booth C2, at 193 Gallery, not to mention it, architectural interventions or interactive sculptures, his work often involves movement, transportability, and audience, activation, shaping new ways to encounter and engage with art. He has been, and it's very interesting, student of Tirvania, that you all know here, this incredible Thai artist that had this MoMA show recently. And he inherits some aspect of the relational aesthetics that you may have heard. His exhibition transforms art into a living, adaptable, and collective experience. His installation challenge traditional exhibitions format, transforming space into dynamic, participatory environments where visitors can activate the works of art, whether through artistic workshops or his foldable and transportable book paintings that you can see again at C2 booth here at the Art Fair. For his first solo show in Paris 193 Galleries, Rue Bérengère, and here on the booth, Rafael has once challenged the conventional white cube, transforming it into an open system. One that encourages spatial exploration. You can come in, don't be afraid. Dialogue and even physical interaction with the works themselves. In a time, welcome my friend, good to see you. Brazilian friend, please give an applause. Rafael chose to exhibit light, transportable and usable art piece in the Art Paris booth with his book paintings. So today we have the privilege, extreme privilege, of directly engaging with Rafael next to me to a deeper understanding of his work. Are you ready? Are you still with me? You can understand everything of my beautiful French accent? Good. I like when people are engaging. So, you conceived your exhibition into two chapters. One at 193 Galleries, as you understand, on Rue Bérengère, and the other one at the booth here on booth C2. How do they connect and interact? First, make an applause to Rafael Domenech. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting symbiosis to sort of think about two completely different formats. One that is more intervene and one that is a lot less. But I think at the end of the show, you think about the fair as a professional kind of architecture that ups and downs in a very particular frame. And it's not much different than what we did at the gallery, right? We partitioned the gallery. So in a way that my interest in architecture and certain kinds of architectures like provisional situations, this is a good example of that, right? But not much difference. I mean, they're connected in the way that the works are displayed, that the works some of the works offer a participatory condition, and some, it tries to close the gap between a work of art and a viewer, in a way.
The first question that came to mind to most people is how does your Cuban experience and your heritage as an artist living in the US influence your work? Because when you go to Cuba, the first thing you are fascinated with is to see how they know everything. They know how to make everything. The cars, you look at the beautiful new cars, and in fact, you open the trunk, brand new motors. Everything is redone. They know every technique immediately. And your work, and your way, the way you work of working, is a bit like that. This genius makes everything, from the idea, production, installation, deinstallation, transportation. He's one of the rare artists I've seen in my entire life who have thought about the entire system to make it simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitably important to sort of think about my childhood. I lived in Cuba for 21 years. So, and I grew up in a house of very handy people, engineers and so on. So, on any given day, you would be having dinner, and half the table was an engine from a car taken apart, and then, on the other side is people eating. So, I grew up with this notion to how things work, because once you learn how things work, you can take them apart if they break and fix, right? And that was very important for me as leaving to the U.S. because when I left Cuba with no point of return, so it's one way only, right? So, like for example, that determined my proximity to certain technology, where a natural way of looking at that technology would be, oh, you buy the machine. I didn't have money to buy the machine, so I would make the machine. So basically, hacking and sort of like going sideways was important, and it was extremely informed by my past. And the same way that at the end of the day, what I make is about negotiating conversations and your presence in any place. There's always this like political stand that I don't necessarily want to subscribe to your model. So I'm going to take your model and I'm going to crack it open and I'm going to, diversify it a little bit and make it a bit more efficient. So yeah, it's been extremely influential.
You describe your work as book paintings, foldable paintings in a book format. Most painting, nowadays are big. It's a volume. And Gabriel, as a gallery, what it means a crate. It means to hang on the wall, but you need as well, if you don't want to show it, the crate goes to the storage or the painting goes to storage. So his work is questioning all those things to make a work that can live as a painting, as a book on a table, as a sculpture standing on a table. So it has always a use and different possibilities. So how did you start to making this conception?
Again, it was to look at, there's so much waste around the existence of painting that it actually at some point made me mad to think that, you have transportation, which is money on a trash bag out the door. You have storage, which is trash bag out the door. And then painting has a very limited active life, right? When it's hanging and someone's viewing it. So I look at all those things, and at that point again, questioning how things got to the point that they are, all the politics around object making. I started to think about, well, can I make an object that considers 75% of that time that's lost as part of the work, as part of the question of the work? Then mobility and portability becomes an element. But then I started to think about painting because I am allergic to classifications, very allergic. I was like, okay, let's think about how to translate forms of making. If you make a painting from the perspective of a book, then the politics of existing, becoming, and occupying space are different. So it was about, okay, I want to make an efficient painting that I can smuggle into a country, that I can have on a table, that you could sit on while it's in storage, and then it's just different parameters, right? Like I have one in my house in my very large bookcase, and if the bookcase becomes a context for that painting to exist closed, so it's sort of like it's the same as open. So and the story at a basic level, I have a very good friend of mine who's a painter, and I said I'm going to make a better painting than you because it's more efficient. So it was a question of the medium in itself and how, and we talk about painting, it's not the image within the surface, is the format and it's the medium itself, because image making it's another layer of painting, right? Like if you then the book paintings are concerned about how image has evolved over time, right? Its relationship to technology, to social context, to image circulation, and all of those things. So as a level was like, no, I want to make an efficient painting.
You brought up that Georges Perec, you know this famous writer and poet, with his book, An Attempt of Exhausting a Place in Paris, influenced you in the way he thinks about the text, place, and image. How does literature or text function in your work? Because as you can see here, you have a lot of text running. The text is holding you, running everywhere, from your computer, your phone, your brain. It's all over. In the city, it's non-stop. So,
Yeah, so George, sorry if I'm butchering the name, but George was a very important person for me because not just a book, the life's manual, you know, but that particular book was about about writing text in a way that looks like a photo in your head, right? You read the text and it's very straightforward. As a person standing in the corner, you immediately position an unfaced person in the corner of the city. So very situational, right? I have a long relationship to the situation is in Paris and, you know, Guy Debord and so on and so forth. So text became, as you moved and to understand the built environment and the space as you inhabit, text is an intrinsic part of it, right? It's an indicator in the city, it's information, it tells you go, stop, turn. And so text enter into the exhibitions because, as you know, I don't look at exhibitions, I look at exhibitions from the outside in, not the other way around. Like I don't make a work and then I think about the show after. I think about the show where that work exists. So as you move into the walls, then you understand, okay, if you think that an exhibition is a publication, it's a book unfolded in space, so to speak, you start to think about how do I place text in a way that is relatable to your human condition in the city, above or below, and we position it in different vectors of the show, so it makes people walk around the show unconsciously, trying to read, trying to reconnect. And the way that book is important for me is because there's not a whole, it's a composite of fragments. So as you move around space and as you move through the day, you make a timeline, right? And that's what it is. The visitor comes into the show and walks around, and at that point, doesn't even understand or look at the photo or at the images or other works. It's trying to read the text. So it just basically moves around, creates circulation. So
the abstract shape, as you can see here below us, and colors in your painting evoke a certain form of technology, resembling the metallic reflection of a machine or a pixelated image. What role does technology play in your work, and how does it interact with the artisanal dimension of your practice?
Well, I mean, technologies. I'm a modern artist, and I say that not because you think about a circle, but because after Rodin, the moment Duchamp put the urinal on a pedestal, says it's all about technology. So, and your relationship to technological process and how technology is, right? So, technology, it's inherently in life, and it relates to image making. So the images that I make, they are a composite of various uses of technology, some digital and some analog, meaning that there's digital images printed in paper, rescanned, reconfigured, fed into the machine again, and so on and so forth. So the technologies, it's important for me because it's a conversation, again, with a direct line to ideas of production and ideas of the city. So yeah.
There is someone who wants to make music on top of us. We appreciate that. It's very nice. It's very useful. You use every day of economic and simple materials in your installations, such as urban materials and furniture. How does this choice of relate to your artistic philosophy and the themes you explore?
I have a very particular position when I start making art, which is like you do what you can do with what you have where you are, and so this idea that you need like $1 million to make a really interesting work of art, I'm opposed to it. So when you look at materials, simple materials, or what we call simple materials, when you start to understand like the background of how those materials came to exist, there's nothing simple about it, you know. Like for example, a sheet of plywood that we use at the gallery, we use it the full size. That sheet of plywood is not that size because someone said, oh, you know, let's just think about it. It has to do with how many sheets of plywood fits in a container coming from another country. So it's about, you know, it's all these complexities that exist. And, you know, but at the very basic bottom, I like to take a material and flip it in a way that when you look at it, you could say, you know, there's something beautiful about that. You know, there's something beautiful about a material that you know and can surprise you at a degree. Yeah.
Many of your installations adopt a DIY approach, where you create the art yourself and guide the audience, you, us, through your instruction during workshop as well. How does this challenge traditional notions of production in contemporary art? Maybe we could ask to this young musician to make a little less noise.
Oy. Yeah, so the DIY thing sort of it ties to my background, but also like I live in a country where I truly believe life has become about subscriptions. You subscribe to a magazine, you subscribe to a TV channel, you subscribe to a coffee shop. So DIY, or like an attempt to remake certain metrics on your own way, it's an opposition to that, right? It's to like, again, going back to technology and tools. Like in the studio, I build all the machines that we use, from laser cutters to CNCs and all of that. And it started as like, oh, I don't have money to buy the machine. Let me figure it out how to replicate it. But it's also a kind of stand against like, if you buy a machine, what you truly buy is service. Is someone coming and fixing the machine for you. So the DIY comes into, let's open up the body of the artwork and let me show you the essence of it. And let's challenge this notion that you have to be separated from it. There's no gap between you and the work. So the workshops, when they're inserted into the pavilions, and sometimes we make the same object that's being displayed as a work of art, it's about, first of all, it comes from a book titled The Community of Those Who Have Nothing in Common. And it's about migrants coming together to a table to build something anew, forgetting the differences of the past. And the way that the workshop was, is it situates people in a moment where you have to talk, you have to converse. And you make something that you know is in a museum, and then you take it home. And then you have a longer life with that object. So in a way, that becomes almost a satellite space of the show. The light, it's on and off when you want to have a conversation in the house. There's this poetic moment, right? That art has to exist in this space, and you as a viewer exist on a different one. No, for me, it's all the same, so, yeah.
Your installation often emphasize this notion of modularity and flexibility. Do you see your work as a form of architecture in constant transformation, permanent motion?
Yeah.
Because it has different form, different possibilities, can move from
Yeah.
one place to another one. It's very simple.
Yeah, so there is a term that I use a lot when I talk and I teach, which is affordance. And it's a term that I read in a book from the 70s about industrial design. and it's the capacity of an object to perform more than one task. So the question when a project comes along is, can it do more than one thing? Can it be more than one element? So a lot of the time, the project it's very much tailored to a place, because as you know, I have a lot of anxieties about making shows in a place I don't live. It's a lot of taking for granted cultural differences, that what I make is important. So bringing in all these elements, negotiating all these elements, you know, makes a modularity more flexible. And then again, I think about, okay, this work exists here today. Half of it may remain in a museum collection, but then half of it goes back to the studio, or half of it someone takes it. What happens with all of that? Can we reuse it? Can we re-clean it and make it material again? So I'm a modular being, like I moved to the US, and the first 5 years of my life, I had to move every day because the rent kept going up. And I was like, okay, I got to find a new apartment. So I had to design my life about modularity, right? So it's about mobility. At the end of the day, it's about mobility. So when a work is made, that's the first question that comes. How does it go? How does it go from point A to point B? And for me, as it's a material. That distance is a material, so you have to think about it.
It's how you build as well your own bookshelf.
Yeah.
Because you explained me, his bookshelf is like box that you can immediately take out and leave and go. It's not something permanent. Each step, each case is one box.
Yeah, so in this process of moving, I have a very extensive book library because I like collecting books. And the first 3 years was like, oh, we have to find 3,000 cardboard boxes. You have to put all the books. And then at one point, I said, hey, listen, there's all these like plastic boxes that they're called milk crates in the US, where milk or things come into the grocery store. They're color coded. They're 12 by 12 by 12. And the largest coffee book table is 12 inches tall, so it fits just right in. And then so I said, I'm gonna make this grid, like almost like a Sol-Lewitt grid, where I'm gonna put all the boxes. And when it's time to move, we're gonna take it down, put it on the ground, and stack it one on top of the other one, like they move boxes at a grocery store, and then just walk away, which was much better for my back.
Yeah. No, that's a super smart way of existing and living. Your installation often redefine exhibition spaces, transforming them into active, participatory environments. Why is it as well important for you that the audience is active and participates?
Because I have a very big problem as an educator, as an artist, with the exclusivity of contemporary art. That distance, that immense distance, that when you walk into a place, you immediately have to know, or it's assumed that you know, you cannot ask a question because then you look in a certain way. And, I think that the job is to sort of translate ideas, not to water them down, to translate ideas at a level that everyone can participate and have a say in it. So participation becomes a really interesting mechanism for that to exist, right? The way that, for example, the way that we do the workshops, I design a workshop. It's non-educational. I'm not here to teach you how to do things. I come in, the workshop lasts 2 hours, 3 hours. I come in, I teach 3 people of the visitors, and then those 3 people teach the next 3, and the next. So it's exponential. My job is to generate a conversation. So participation, it's also like participation generates unaccounted moments, like very beautiful unaccounted moments where things that it takes away your expectations. There's no expectations of what's going to happen. You don't know the outcome. Things might break. Things might get stolen. Things might, all of these things. And I think it's important, because at the end of the day, every project is an experiment for the next to happen. So,
but it's quite rare to have artists that makes a workshop themselves with the audience not for just a little drawing that has no value, but he's making workshop where you may do with him a lamp that he has in the show, and you take this lamp to your house. So it has this generosity that's very rare in the art world, that is mostly keep, is giving, not to destroy his market, this is not the idea, but that people can as well live a moment of a creation and take it home. And that is something quite rare that I've rarely seen in the field of art for the last 4 decades. So it's something quite relevant in your practice and permanent.
Yeah. So, it's a difficult conversation with galleries all the time because here comes the bomb. I have a very particular rule, which is, as you know, and the galleries know, museum shows are not for sale. So none of my projects that are commissioned, developed, exhibited, they go to the market. None of the works in the show goes to the market, nothing. And there's many reasons for that. Again, the first material of a project is a conversation. The second material is money. And how to use that money efficiently and with a consciousness is important. So there's all this, like, when I was in graduate school, I wrote a paper titled Transparent Architecture. And it was, in a building exist two forms of architecture: the tectonics, columns, floors, windows, but there's also this other architecture called rules and regulations. It affects everything very much as a wall will do, as a column would do. So one of those regulations when you do an exhibition in a contemporary art museum is insurance value, all these things. So the first thing we do in a museum is we come in and say, show me the budget. And we restructure the budget completely.
This is normally the only discussion we have nowadays with an artist.
Yeah.
First question is not what is your issue, what is the budget?
Yeah, so, and like insurance value is always zero because at the end of the show, we put everything in the middle of the gallery and anyone that happens to come to the show that week takes part of it. I also make sure that anyone that participates, from an installer to the person that cleans the bathroom in the museum, gets a piece. And for me that's important as a person. I don't know. It's about circulation, And then when you do projects at the galleries you work with, then you tailor those projects for the context that it exists, right? You have conversations. One is not better than the other one. They're just two different realms, two different worlds that can coexist with each other, but also can stay apart in that way.
It's a little bit what artists like Gilbert and George were saying with their art for all and not just for a little crowd that have the possibility to buy, but art is made really for a bigger crowd, for everyone. There is no VIP, everybody is a VIP, basically.
Yeah, it's like, this idea, every radical form of art ends being not so radical at the end, and so I think it's about making what makes you feel the best. And again, for me, is that if you have an opportunity to do a project, when you have certain things around that prevents you from going certain directions, you do really explore the maximum possibilities for that particular moment, because you don't have a responsibility afterwards. It's for that project, it exists in that project, it will end in that project, and then you just go for it, And I do disagree with artists that uses museums for revaluing works of art. That's like, because at the end of the day, some of these shows have interesting budgets. You could buy a house with that budget. Go and buy a house, you're gonna solve a real problem. So.
2 last questions before you can scream and ask your own question. If you could create a large-scale project without any constraints, what would it look like?
Depends on where it is.
Wherever. Paris.
I don't know.
Here. Grand Palais.
It'll definitely be a place. I can tell you the politics of it, which it'll be definitely a place for that any single human being can be part of. and them being part of it will transform and condition the way it looks. So it'll change over time. So
Beautiful ending. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. If you have any questions, reaction, suggestions, we are very happy to hear your voices. S'il vous plaît. Madame, I give you my mic. I'm here for the questions. No, I'm not important either. We are not.
Merci. And in English, okay. I see on the exhibition and here on the image that you have also the wall that is interacting with the work, and this. ¿Eh? Okay. Sí, pero estoy hablando en inglés, no estoy hablando en español.
No, it's okay.
Okay, the idea is this. When I saw the exhibition and in the photo here, you have the wall integrated to the work. And so, how is this coming on? Because you say you come with a little thing, but then you construct these walls. Okay, that's part also of the also intervention of the gallery. Is part of the work that is nomadic, or is also part of the book that you can read?
Very good question.
so
Did you understand?
yeah. So
I stay here for the next.
when I say I go in, it's like the walls were the first thing that came for the show. So the walls are part of the work, they're intrinsic part of the work. Because again, I see the entire exhibition as one work. So so the first thing that showed, and we received the layout of the gallery, and we had a conversation, and then I realized that the gallery had a very complicated layout, and then the idea was like, let's just make it more complicated from the beginning. And so the walls are, everything in that show is definitely part of the work. It just affects like it's when you write in a book, you have a header, you have footnotes, you have a body, you have an introduction, you have a conclusion, you have a thesis. So the gallery is the book. Everything inside are that, all those fragments. So yeah, so then, the I can hear it, no? So then the walls become the bookshelves for the works itself when they are away. So yeah, I mean, everything's part of the work in that particular moment. And everything is carefully considered to the space and how people are in the space. I don't know if that makes sense.
We could add, because your question was, every single element is a piece. The wall, the little lamp that you see, the yellow thing, the pieces below, everything. So you could say, I want this, as you said, it's not an extra wall made in a gallery. It's not like here, there is many extra walls. Here, all the walls are works. No walls here are works. This is the opposite. So you could take all those walls for another show. You can take one partition to your house or somewhere else. So everything is usable. There is no decor. Everything is an art piece. Est-ce que ça a répondu à votre question?
Yes, I think it's the artist who has to answer if that has to do with him. No, but it's fantastic, sure.
Yes. Obviously. Any other questions?
It seems that you have a strategy which is quite new of showing and collecting artworks, which is physical and in situ, site-specific. How would you imagine this at the global planetary way? Would you imagine that it would be possible to exchange or to do a platform where we can actually share this way in other places, in other parts of the world?
You mean share in the sense of building, or?
No, for instance, you do workshops at your place. Would you imagine a workshop done in other parts by other people who would do the same thing?
Yeah.
Here in Paris, in London, in
Yeah.
in Eastern Europe, in I don't know, somewhere. So what I see, in other words, that you have a new concept, which you actually, not that you have it as in principle, but you actually apply it and you practice it. And what I think we need all to share it in a way to get confidence to practice it in other places in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that. I've been in exhibitions where I haven't been able to go. Like, for example, I had a show in China where I broke my leg 2 days before I went, and it was a complete change in the way that the exhibition existed after I broke my leg, where I said, I need you to find a curator, someone that can operate in many worlds, and I need to have a conversation. And I said to the curator, I'm giving you the keys to the show, drive it as you please. So basically, he created in my solo show, then became 50 plus people group show, because we call it the contaminated project, where I said it was exciting for me to see photos of how the show had nothing to do with how it started. And for me, that was great. That was the best outcome ever, because then I went to the same city 4 years after, and people are like, I know you. I'm like, I don't know you, but I guess we met, because they were part of the project. And it also created an opportunity for others to exist. I have a very important politics in my life. It's like once I go through the door, the job is to keep the door open as much as possible for others to come. It's not to shut it down. So, yeah, we design workshops to happen when I'm there, when I'm not there. It's always been different. Again, every project is a different scenario and a different outcome, and that's what I love about it. That's what it keeps me awake to, like, how do we figure this out together? Not like another question is like when we did in Saudis, the cultural separation was so big that at the beginning it was sort of hard to try to like get them going, But at the end, I said to people, this is not about me. I am a prompt, you take it and you do it. It's about you. And then it becomes great, because then it's just like, yeah, I don't know. So.
There is one more question of this young gentleman in the back.
One, thank you. That was very interesting to both you guys. That was cool. So many questions, but just one. So it seems as if you're very concerned with the politics of objecthood, sort of like the material conditions of, not just the materials you're using, but, the machines that you use to shape them. And that comes through very clearly in your work. And then it seems as if like those art objects, if I'm allowed to call them that, relate to the sort of politics of space, like the politics or sort of the rules and regulations of space, with, as you can see in like the gallery. And so it's a question with two subparts. And then the first one being, what do you see as a sort of relationship between the politics of space and then the politics of objects? And then what do you see how that relationship affects sort of what you want to convey or have the viewer experience while they're in that space with those sort of contingent elements of the space, but also the contingent elements of the objects?
Yeah. We're gonna first answer second and then first. So we are political beings. We are born into a political structure, right? That you're conformed by politics, whether you see it or not, you want to acknowledge it or not. So the politics of objects and how it affects the way they display or what you want to convey. The first museum exhibition I've ever did I was offered that question. What's the value of your work? And it was at a museum exhibition that was artist books. So, and then I knew a lot of people in that show, a lot of artists. They all decided to put a value, monetary value on their work. And I asked this. I answered the question with a question: was, what does it mean? How will it affect the way it's displayed? And the answer from the curator was, well, if you put value, then we're going to put it in a vitrine, we're going to enclose it, people can touch it. But then if we say zero value, then it's exposed to touch, to be taken, stolen, broken. And for me, it was so sexy, you know, like, oh my God, I wish that someone took it. Because I would take it, you know what I mean? It's like, I go to the museum, and I go, like, so it's a nice painting, you know? So for me, that, you know, I try to position things in the way to try not to affect what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to say, right? And so what are the politics of object making and space making? They're both the same, you know. They're both controlled and presented under the same conditions, right? So, like for example, when I've been in exhibitions with some of my friends, and they're going like size specific. Size specific, it's like a very particular wording in the art world as to like, oh, I took into consideration details. And I said to my friend, your work got pushed 36 inches of the wall because you need a wheelchair to go through. How size specific is really, you know? So I think it's like, it's all the same. You just have to pay attention to it, you know? Like, you just have to sort of think about, can I make, like, for example, when we've done a pavilion within a building, not outside, inside, it's about acupuncture. It's about putting a building within the building, that building brings its own politics, its own regulations, its own interaction that completely supersedes the museum's ones. For example, I did a project at a museum where I was invited onto, let's make a social space and a public space, but then the museum charged entry fee. And I said, well, we got a conflict here. So I said, show me the budget. We moved money from the production, and I said, we're gonna cover the entry fee to the museum for the 3 months that my show happens. Because if you really wanna talk about a democratic public space, you cannot have it gated by that. Because not everyone can pay the $23 that costs to go into a museum. I have kids, so if I go to a museum, it's like $100, you know? So how you deal with the politics is it's what I'm interested at, you know? Like, honestly, and again, it's different for every artist, and I don't speak for anyone else. I just, all I do is like, if I try to make the work, it makes me happy. So when I go back home, I can go to sleep. I said, I did the best I could with what I was given in the moment and at the time I was at. So, yeah. So, I don't know.
One last question, if there is. If not, thank you to everyone. Have a great day.